Before we go into that, can you tell us what research says about grooming?
Sure. This is where the teacher in me gets to come out. So of course I had to make some PowerPoint slides. There has been a lot of research on grooming, and not just talking to those who have been groomed. They go into the prison systems, they talk to the predators, they find out what do you do to get kids to trust you, to get, make it so this abuse can happen. And what they've done is they've divided it into 5 areas, which we'll go over in just a minute here. And within those 5 areas, there are like 42 specific behaviors. And on average, a predator will use about 15 of them. And I point that out because a lot of these behaviors are things that seem very innocuous. They are things that you would do if you were trying, say you're working with a youth group. You're going to see some of the things up here that you would do. So it is not necessarily the behavior itself, it's the intent behind the behavior. But we're going to look at some of these, not all 42, but we're going to look at some of these. If you could advance. So the first thing a predator does is they look for somebody who is vulnerable. They want somebody who has a need, that find a need, fill a need, okay? You'll notice I've got some where I've highlighted and some I've highlighted and underlined. Those are the ones that they see most often. And unavailable parents, so those who are working multiple jobs and leaving their child alone. Unfortunately, I was one of those when my daughter was a teenager. I was working 2 and 3 jobs in order to keep food on the table. Lack of supervision, that one is huge. If you have a parent who is always around getting into their kid's business, a predator is going to back away because it's a hassle they don't need. There's enough kids out there that don't have a parent that is supervising. Access and isolation. They want to, first of all, get with the child and then separate them. In person, that used to be like sleepovers and activities and things where they would get kids away from the parents. Now, though, online, a lot of times what that looks like is they're going to, like my house, we have Friday night pizza night. It's families, all the kids, the grandkids come over to our house for Friday night pizza. A predator, if he were going to target one of my grandkids, would find out about that Friday night pizza night and then make that time the only time they can be available to play a game with them or to do something with them online. And it doesn't take a predator very long online to develop that relationship with a child. And if you have somebody who's very young and impressionable, they're going to eventually get to the point where they're like, I don't want to go to pizza night, I'm going to stay home. And then it's to meet with this person online. Okay, advance. Trust development. We need, or I should say the predator needs them to trust them. And they're going to do that very deceptively. So they're going to, again, see a need, fill a need. If the child is lacking affection in their life, they're going to provide affection in their life. If they need somebody to buy them things, the drip from the jewelry, they're going to do that. Things to make them feel special. That attention, favoritism. For me, my uncle, it was a lot of it had to do with favoritism. I wanted to be his favorite. And online, it could be, well, you know what, I got all these other buddies over here that'll play games with me. If you don't want to, that's just fine. I got somebody, and the kid's gonna be, nope, I want to be your friend too. And they'll jump in there. In person, drugs and alcohol are huge. Providing, if the child is already experimenting with drugs, then they just give them drugs. If they're not, then they might expose them to drugs and alcohol and in order to kind of help get them hooked. and they're just more pliable and easily coerced if they're on drugs and alcohol. The desensitization in the old days, that used to be accidental touching. They put their arm around the kid and it's on the shoulder, then it might drape down and kind of brush the breast, and then it's just, actually being on the breast. Nowadays, though, in the digital world, a lot of this desensitization has already occurred. They see it on TV, they see it online, so I'm going to show you some information that's probably going to shock you about how kids are so desensitized to sex. And so now they'll be like, hey, you know what, I bet you're beautiful. Why don't you send me your picture? So then they send a picture. Ooh, I bet you'd look really good in a slinky dress. Oh, how about a bathing suit? Oh, how about a negligee? And then they kind of work at getting photos. And some of these kids will just outright do the nude photos without that buildup because that desensitization has already occurred. Okay, advance. The post-abuse maintenance, that is what keeps the kid from telling. Obviously, they tell them, you can't tell anybody. That's the big one. For me, it was that my uncle would always say, this is what people who love each other do. So they misrepresent morality and what's normal. The child could be made to feel responsible. Well, then you shouldn't have sent that picture to me. What'd you think I was going to do with it? Of course I'm going to share it. But they do things to, it might be if you don't continue to do this, I'm going to tell your parents. I'm going to share the photo with your friends, that sort of thing. So that's, in human trafficking terms, that's the force and coercion that comes in. All right, so that is kind of the grooming in a nutshell. How about Ruth, we kind of bring this in and you tell us about your grooming experience.
Well, my grooming started way before I met my trafficker. All 6 of us 6 kids were abused and neglected at home. Keep in mind, I was growing up in the 50s and 60s. In my day, believe it or not, abuse wasn't really even considered abuse. And covert abuse was really unheard of. Abuse was pretty much legal back then, simply because abuse and the effects of trauma were so misunderstood by everybody, including law enforcement, mental health professionals, and families. Today, we know so much more about abuse and the effects of trauma. Back then, there was no mandated reporting, there was no domestic violence centers, there was no rape crisis centers, and nobody knew how to treat post-traumatic stress disorder. For war veterans, it was called shell shock. Abuse was pretty much normal for me growing up. My father was a raging alcoholic and my mother was a battered woman. My sister and I had to take the belt if we came home late from curfew or if we talked back. I was raped several times before I was 13 years old, and my family knew nothing about them until I was gang raped at age 13. This was after my brothers went to Vietnam, and I'm sure the rapist knew this. Victim blaming was huge back then. I was admitted to a mental hospital, and I stayed there for 9 months. There, they tried to figure out what was wrong with me. I was admitted after I was treated for an STD. The rapists were set free. Nobody even bothered to investigate. And to top it off, my parents said I was a stupid whore. So I grew up blaming myself, and I believed I was beyond redemption, and I wanted to die. Because of the abuse I was subjected to as a child, half of the brainwashing work was already done for my trafficker way before he met me. I became desperate for love and attention, and this is what made me easy prey for traffickers. Like Dee said, I called my first trafficker my boyfriend because I thought that's what he was. I didn't realize he was grooming me. I called it dating. He said I was beautiful and he treated me like a queen, and I was smitten. I thought I had finally found my hero. I eventually confided in him and told him all of my problems. I told him everything. I told him way too much. I told him everything that he needed to know. He knew I was being bullied in school, that my dad was an alcoholic and my mom was a battered woman. He knew my older brothers and sisters were out of the house starting their own families. When I confided in him about the rapes, this man made me believe that I was stupid too, for letting those men have me for free. I remember feeling so embarrassed about this. When I was 14, 15 years old, I had a lot of questions about boyfriends and dating and puberty. I had nobody to go to with these questions except for my trafficker. He taught me everything. He always took me to a gambling house, and he called me his little good luck charm. One day he called me up and said that he couldn't come pick me up anymore because he lost a lot of money at the gambling house. He said he didn't even have any money for gas. Lame excuse, but for me I was just so naive. He said if I went to the gambling house with him to help him win that money back, he would borrow some gas money from somewhere and come pick me up. And I agreed. I was so naive. At the time, I didn't know the gambling house was also a drug house and a brothel. And I figured he would appreciate it if I helped him out somehow. After all the money he spent on me, taking me out and buying me clothes, he had me right where he wanted me. Even though I agreed, I had no idea that there was 4 grown men there eagerly waiting for my arrival. My boyfriend set me up to be gang raped. After that, he reminded me often that I agreed. He implied that it was my fault I was gang raped, and I believed him. I was ready to guard this secret with my life. I can now see that he used typical trafficking tactics on me. He gained my trust by treating me like a queen, got the information he needed. Then he created a hardship, and then he created a solution. And then he broke my spirit with the gang rape. I was already dependent on him because I was a runaway. I needed a place to stay. Traffickers evoke fear and confusion in their victims once they become attached to them. Looking back, all of this could have been prevented had I had that one person in my life that I could go to with my questions. Brenda, since your abuser was a relative, how is your grooming similar or different than mine?
Some of the key facts are the same. You've got the develop the trust, make them feel special, finding those vulnerabilities. For me, I was an awkward child. I was overweight. I was clumsy. I just never felt like I really fitted in. I wanted friends. I wanted to feel special. And don't get me wrong, my parents loved me, okay? I never, ever doubted that my parents loved me. And I think that had a huge, that was a huge part of why I had some resiliency and I've been able to, move on and be successful. There's something in some of us that make us very resilient. So I wanted him, he was just so charismatic and fun-loving. However, when the abuse did occur, when the friends were introduced and we were shared, then again, it's, they flip it on you, as the victim, you're the one who's responsible for all of that. And when it comes to trafficking, even though I don't consider my case human trafficking, here in West Michigan, we do see a lot of familial trafficking where parents are using their kids to buy drugs or, to get money, that sort of thing. So in that case, the grooming doesn't necessarily occur, but in my case, I think it was pretty much as I outlined there. So how about we move on, because both Ruth and I, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have the online part, so if we can advance the slide, I'm going to go back into teacher mode here. As I mentioned, online grooming happens very quickly. And since 2020, with everybody being sent home and sequestered in their homes for that period of time, online sexual exploitation, child sexual exploitation has gone through the roof, which I'm going to show you here in a minute. So in 2023, the cyber tip line through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they had over 36 million tips for suspected child exploitation.
Wow.
I know this one's a little bit hard to see, but you'll notice that pornography, while that's the vast majority of the tips is related to child pornography, a huge increase was through sexual enticement, so online sexual enticement. That one was 44,000 and has now jumped to over 186, almost 187,000
Wow.
instances in 2023. So when we look at child sexual enticement, online, you'll notice that, yes, we had a big jump, 2019, 2020, but between 2020 and 2023, that's 493% increase. And a lot of that is because not only were we all stuck at home, but kids were given computers and tablets and told, the schools gave them the tools that the predators are now using to get them. And 98% of those who were enticed online said that they hadn't met their, the abuser. It was somebody that they had met, they didn't know them in person. All right, next. So here you'll notice that I have a list of platforms. And on here, I have things highlighted. And the ones in red are the ones with the highest number of enticement. Thorne did a survey of youth, 9 to 17, and asked them to indicate if they had ever experienced online sexual interaction with somebody. And you'll notice things like Instagram, Snapchat, Telegram, Twitter, WhatsApp, those are the platforms that we would expect people to interact with our children. Now the ones in green, and that I've underlined here, the numbers are smaller, but I like research, so I kind of did this little drill down thing, and I looked at their surveys from 2019, 2020, 2021, and when these youth indicated what platforms they're using, some of these weren't even around in 2019 or they weren't being used very much. However, there is a huge increase in the use of Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, Roblox, and Roblox in the 9 to 12-year-old range is huge. And of course, TikTok. So those are the platforms that our kids are using now more than ever. In my professional opinion, in a few years, we're not going to be seeing Facebook and Messenger being used for sexual interaction. It's going to be these games. It's going to be Minecraft. It's going to be Fortnite. So if you have kids that are on these platforms, it's just really important to keep track of what they're doing. Okay, next. Now this is where the prepared to be shocked part comes in. 1 in 3 minors, 9 to 17-year-olds, have reported sexual interactions online. 1 in 3. 29% of minors had that sexual interaction with someone they knew to be an adult. Next.
Wow.
Next. Okay. 1 in 7 9 to 17-year-olds report that they have shared nudes. Now, if we increase that or narrow that down to 13 to 17-year-olds, that becomes 1 in 5. So 20% of our 13 to 17-year-olds are sharing nudes online. 52% of minors had shared their own nudes, and they did it with somebody they met online. So if they shared it, more than half are doing it with people they don't know. 1 in 4 minors agreed that it's normal for people their age to share nudes. So 25% of our kids think it's normal to be texting nudes back and forth. 32% of 13 to 17-year-olds say it's normal. So that increases to 1 in 3. All right, 9 to 17-year-olds report having shown or sent someone else's nude without their consent. So 25% of our kids, if they get a nude sent to them, think nothing of sending it to somebody else. It's just something you share. They don't care about consent. 49% of kids say that if a nude gets out, it's your fault. So they're victim blaming.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So when these pictures go online like that, can they be, you're going to get to that part.
I'll get to
You'll
that.
Get to, okay.
Yep.
I'm trying to jump ahead.
Yes, there is a way to get those nudes down, which I'll,
Oh, yeah, I
next.
have
There we
another
go.
question.
Right there it is. Okay, so take it down. We do have a take it down flyer out there. Otherwise, if you're online, take a screenshot of this. But NCMEC has a website where if you're under the age of 18 and you have nudes floating around in cyberspace, they can help you get it down. And here are some other resources for you. I'm going to show this slide a couple of times because I think it's so important that we know what to do to help our kids if they happen to make a poor decision. Okay. Yes.
So I have heard about a story about a girl that was trafficked from her own bedroom. And it was really actually human trafficking because they made money off it. Is that common?
Yeah.
Okay, so parents can not even know that their child is in the bedroom being trafficked. Right?
If it's online, especially, as far as these nudes go, being used for pornography, they can, even using the web cams, they can get pictures and access to computers and get things without kids' consent even. When it comes to cybersecurity, I would never want my kid to have a laptop open in their bedroom. They should always close it so that that camera is disengaged. And nowadays, you'll see, if you saw in that one first slide I showed with the number of tips, a lot of it is pornography. And so they are taking these pictures that kids are sending or getting without consent, they're sending them around. And AI, they don't even, if they can get them to send a picture even with just a bathing suit, or what makes me cringe is on Facebook, all of these mothers who put these cute little baby pictures with a little sticker over them and they're in the bathtub, and or a washcloth cover. Okay, with AI, they can take that picture and turn it into child porn. No problem whatsoever. So we need to be careful what is being online. You also have to be careful what is in the background, because if they have anything related to their school in the background, the trafficker can figure out where they live, get information about their neighborhood, and then get it into a meeting type situation. Can you go to the next slide? There. In fact, this happened in Grant, Michigan. Grant started doing human trafficking prevention education in their high school, and now it's expanding to all of Newaygo County. because they found several cases of human trafficking in their high school just by bringing awareness. This particular case, a student was in a lesson, learned about grooming, and immediately went to her counselor and went, "Oh my gosh, I think this is happening to me." And they brought in the resource officer, and this gentleman, I use the term loosely, was coming from Pennsylvania just, a few days later to come pick her up and take her away. And the FBI stepped in and they were able to make arrest, and he is now awaiting charges.
Yeah, wow.
Jordan DeMay. He is a 17-year-old high school senior from Marquette, Michigan, so up north. He thought he was chatting with a young lady on Instagram. And this young lady asked him to send him some nudes, and he didn't think anything of it, and he went ahead and sent some nudes. Come to find out, it was brothers from Nigeria in Africa. And they then started, it was sextortion. So they told him that if he didn't give them money, then they were going to share his pictures with his family and friends. He did send them some money, but then they kept asking for more and he couldn't. And so they basically said, "You know what? Well, you better commit suicide because we're going to make your life miserable." And the young man did commit suicide.
So much evil.
Fortunately, they have found these Nigerian brothers, and they are currently in West Michigan awaiting trial.
This is not an isolated thing. There's
No.
so many kids killing themselves now because of just
Yep.
Yep, sextortion is, FBI says there's like a 10-fold increase in sextortion cases. All right. So we've spent a lot of time about grooming and what to watch for. So now we need to talk about how we can help. If you can go to the next slide. Ruth has this great story about what it's like for somebody who has been victimized and advocates are trying to help.
Well, I was approached by both traffickers and advocates when I was on the street, and it was pretty difficult to decipher who to get help from because they all use the same strategies to try to lure the victims in their way, and all of them look pretty much normal people.
Next slide, please.
Excuse me. They both offered to meet my basic needs, food and shelter. And it was well known on the street that most of these shelters were the most dangerous places to live. I was in safe houses and rehabs with the very same people I was on the street with the very same people that I wanted to sever relationships with. When my family took me back in, it was easier for me to burn those bridges. This is why it is important for advocates to understand that if a victim does not accept your kindness, or if a victim rejects you, please don't take it personal. It takes time to gain the trust of victims. Remember, they've seen a lot of corruption and they've been betrayed by many. It's all about being patient with them and giving them the time that they need to feel safe. Remember, traffickers didn't give them choices. They pressured them. We need to do the opposite. If they are not ready for change, though, you do have to let them go. If you're too giving, you could become the victim's victim, because a lot of victims get pretty clingy. And if they're on the street or if they're experienced, they're pretty streetwise. This is why it's important for victims to understand that you have to be careful who you open up to. Don't trust blindly, and don't trust right away. Pay more attention to their actions than their words. Intimate relationships always start out with the infatuation stage. Let life test the relationship, and let the infatuation stage pass before you trust or open up to anyone. Healthy, intimate relationships consist of giving and taking. Pay attention to the imbalances. Intimate relationships won't always be 50-50. But these numbers can be a gauge to help you measure the imbalance. With professional relationship, there's always a power imbalance. Learn to recognize what they are. Remember, young people, there's good secrets and there's bad secrets. Bad secrets will eat away at you. I can attest to that. And bad secrets gives your own power away. Remember, traffickers are not concerned about your safety and your future, and advocates are concerned about your safety and future. Let your heart lead you, not your mind. And kids, don't prioritize being accepted and being popular over feeling safe. It's all about being patient with yourself. It takes time for anybody to build confidence in themselves, even adults. We are all only human. There's a handout of our basic human rights in the back. I think that could help kids to decipher on their relationships. I refer to it often. Even adults have a hard time setting boundaries sometimes.
Next slide. Also in the back, I have a few of these from the Lakeshore Human Trafficking Task Force. They have some great handouts, tips for teens as well as tips for parents. If though you're online, just go ahead to the lhttf.org and their resource tab and you can download these yourself. Next. I also can't recommend enough NetSmartz. Parents, please go to NetSmartz. They have a ton of things there that you can use to engage with your youth, and even some young children, to try to get the conversation started and to help them develop those good boundaries and to recognize when grooming is happening. And of course, there's the Take It Down that I can't encourage people to have that in their back pocket because sometimes kids make bad choices. Our brains aren't developed until we're in our mid-20s, so yes, all full of emotions with very little critical thinking skills. So please have that in your back pocket in case a bad decision is made. All right, we're going to have the others come up here now.